Welcome back. Well, yes, indeed, that speech is part of what we're still focusing on. This morning, we've got...
generating its attention.
Yes, it's still generating, and so they're both weighing on it. That's why we had to hold our gunpowders until now.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Key is an APC chieftain, and then Duran Odemi is Deputy National Publicity Secretary of the PDP, who will join us via Zoom from London. But Mr. Key, there's a little argument about how your first name is pronounced. So perhaps we should start with correcting it. Maybe you should just point it out to us, because sometimes we could miss it here and there. Could you tell us, how is your first name pronounced?
Good morning, Chamberlain.
Good morning.
Ayo, good morning.
Good morning.
I said your name is on Google, and Google had to
Nigerians.
give us the right pronunciation.
Okay, the right pronunciation is Fuad.
Okay.
Told you.
That's good. So we were right on that one. All right. So it's good to hear from the horse's mouth sometimes. Okay, but Mr. Okidi's speech that the president gave, still generating a lot of hoopla. Many not happy with that speech. In fact, you know how they can be dismissive of the speech, saying, no, nothing, it's all speech, no action. You see Northern Elders saying they thought that they were going to hear the president's announce the sack of service chiefs in that speech, but that didn't happen. So, so much response coming through from the speech. How do you respond to it?
Well, I'll start by saying that we are a nation of over 200 million people. So you certainly do not expect that all the 200 million people will accept what the president says. Let's start from there. You must also understand very clearly that we are not too happy with the way things have gone the last 6 months, particularly. And as impatient as we are as Nigerians, we feel that the president should come out and do, just the talking. And I don't think that is what should be, or that is what has been. And mind you, those who got us to where we are today have not found reasons to sit down and accept the fact that they got us to where we are today. Though the chairman of PDP sometime in 2018 came out to apologize to Nigerians for getting us into this mess years back. And unfortunately for them, they find it very, very terrible today, to say, oh, this government is not doing it, that government is not doing this. This question is, what will have you done the other way? What will you do better? Because it's not just about criticizing, it's not just about saying, oh, we did not see anything in the speech, we did not do. I think opposition and an effective opposition should be, this is what we feel has gone wrong, this is how we feel we should do it. And not just by saying, oh, we did not do this, we did not do that, we did not hear from him, this is what we expect. And I think on the issue of service chiefs, I think we've done so much talking about the issue of service chiefs. So much that we even forget our own responsibilities. And we must be very clear about that. Yes, the service chiefs, in our opinion, have overstayed. They are welcome. They have done this, they have done. I think they are doing their best. They've done their best. Yes, I also agree. There is need for a rejig, of the whole system. And the president has come out very clearly, unlike previous times. It's come out very clearly that this year, going forward, he is going to rejig the whole system. And it's not just the military, the police inclusive. I think we should give kudos to the president for coming out this year to say, we've seen the problem very clearly and we've realized that there is need for us to rejig the system. possibly in rejigging it, maybe bringing in, fresh ideas, creative thinking, either in or out of the box. Why don't we allow the president another 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, to come again to us with his thinking in terms of revamping, rejigging the whole security architecture? After all, the essence of governance and the reason for government is for the protection of lives and property, for the safety and security of its citizenry. So I think the president has done well this time around. He's done very, very well in acknowledging the fact that we have security challenge, in assuring us that going forward, there is going to be a revamp of the old security architecture.
Let me bring to the PDP. Let me bring to the PDP, which you referenced, and let's see if they'll tell that same line about kudos. Mr. Odeyemi, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much for this opportunity and compliment of the season to Nigeria.
Thank you.
Just yesterday, we listened to Boris Johnson in UK addressing the citizens. Quite frankly, you saw in him somebody who knew exactly what he was saying. Somebody who is convinced about the topic he was talking about, that is COVID-19. You saw the mannerism in which he delivered his speech. This is contrary to what happened in Nigeria. Rather than the president addressing the nation, what he did was to read a prepared speech given to him, by his aides. And if you want to assess this, you look at it in various dimensions. Is it in terms of content or in terms of personal conviction of what the president was reading out to Nigerians? There was no correlation between the two. You will see in the president saying something that he is not convinced about. Look at the content. The president talked about EndSARS, and he said something like, we have listened, we have heard. Are Nigerians really convinced that we have a government that listens at all? We heard the president saying, or admitting, that there are lots to be done in terms of security, protecting the lives and property of Nigerians. Is he really convinced about what he said by still retaining the service chiefs?
Let's take a look at
the agitation.
Some parts of what he said about security. So let's just show you some parts of it, because you did ask if he's really convinced about it. So you could see part of it which read they were going to re-energize and reorganize the security apparatus and personnel of the armed forces and the police with a view to enhance their capacity to engage, push back, and dismantle the operations of both internal and external extremists and criminal groups waging war against our communities in some parts of the country. However, we recognize that we rapidly have to move to a more proactive and preemptive posture to ensure that these sorts of traumatic incidents do not become a norm. Isn't this somewhat definitive on his part?
I want to draw you back to about a year ago, when the president sought for the sum of 365 billion naira to counter Boko Haram. And after 6 months of getting that fund, they came back to tell us that Boko Haram had been technically defeated. We are moving into 2021 now, 2021. And the president is still coming to us and telling Nigerians that they're going to re-energize the military or the armed forces to fight insurgents in Nigeria. Who is deceiving who? And recently, just that same day, the chief of army staff went prophetic by saying that the Boko Haram will be disgraced. We are talking of a military who is talking like a pastor. Does that mean disgrace or destroy? Is their work to disgrace Boko Haram? Or they are to destroy and restore the hope of Nigeria in the security architecture of the country? I want to put it, and I want you to agree with me.
Are you saying in
has not said
effect,
anything other than what we know?
one moment, Mr. Adeyemi, are you saying in effect that we haven't made any progress whatsoever in terms of security?
Maybe you are a journalist and you can Google it. Anybody in Nigeria can Google it. How many lives have been lost? And even between now and the time the president delivered his speech, have you not seen Boko Haram operating in the north? Has anything stopped? Has anything changed? Nothing has changed. All that we keep hearing is hope. We will, we shall re-energize. When exactly are you going to do this? That is the question. We are not expecting the president to give us any hope again.
All right, let's take this. Yes, let's take this to Mr. Oki to see what his perspective will be on what you have raised. Well, Mr. Oki, the concerns about security or a lack of it, or the challenges we are having with it, is not centralized to one person or one group of people. It seems like it's a general consensus that we're not doing as well as we ought to do in terms of security.
Thank you, Ayo. Let me first point out something very clearly, and it is rather unfortunate when the likes of Mr. Adeyemi will begin to compare what is happening in Nigeria with what the Prime Minister of the UK, it's saying about COVID. And part of the problems in this country, it's when you have elites who have lost touch with reality on ground in their home state, begin to seek or look for solutions elsewhere. Because there is no need for comparison. We all have our issues. Great Britain has its issue. Nigeria has it. We have our issues. We are talking about internal security here. Maybe Mr. Adeyemi and others like him really do not understand what the issue really is. It's not about a conventional war. It's about a war where and which you do not know who the enemy combatant is. And we need to understand this. We must also understand very clearly that this is not where we were in 2015. This is not where we were in 2019. We may not be where we would have wished to be or where we think we should be, but certainly we are not going back. And we must understand that very clearly. We are not going back. Mr. Adeyemi, for some reasons, and clearly has shown that nothing, absolutely nothing good can be seen from what the president is doing or what this government is doing. I clearly acknowledge the fact that we have problems, there are challenges. We must also appreciate one thing very clearly, and that is today we can go to bed and sleep, albeit not too soundly, but not the way we were before 2015. We must appreciate the fact that the Nigerian military is doing its utmost. Maybe not good enough as we would want, but we should not say we have not seen anything good about what they are doing. Yes, there is need for us to rejig. The president has promised that is giving assurances that now, more than any other time, we will ensure that the issue in the northeast, the issue in the north central, which is rubbing off on the southwest, the issue in the southeast will be addressed more drastically. The last 6-7 months in Nigeria, everybody, including the legislature, it's sack the service chiefs, sack the service chiefs, sack the service chiefs. But we must know one thing very clearly. This is the only country I know where every Nigerian is a medical doctor, is an engineer, is a military strategist, it's an economist, name it. So today, we all want the service chiefs sacked. How many of us understands military system, processes, their procedure, other than coming out to say somebody was in class 21 and somebody is in class 29 and you need to move for others to come to the forefront.
Okay,
what are we talking about? Are we saying, okay?
Let me take it to Mr. Odeyemi, but about that matter you raised, I mean, many can respond thinking, but in this country, leaders, politicians don't allow professionals thrive in their field. They just call their cronies and put them in different positions and not allowing professionals do what they are there for. And perhaps that's why you see everybody jack of all trades and, as she was suggesting, master of none. But that's just on the one hand. But Mr. Odeyemi, having heard him talk about, you or your party not seeing anything good in whatever is being done, so is that the politician in you or the Nigerian who thinks that, look, well, I've seen what they've done previously, and as a result of that, this statement, because he also did say, yes, there are some, he did acknowledge some shortcomings in that speech, and with the promise of them doing a little better, he's suggesting benefit of doubt.
I want to correct the misconception of Mr. Oki about my person, and this is that perhaps I live in London. That is not the situation. I'm only in London. I came to London about 2 weeks ago, and in a few days I'll be back in Nigeria. So I don't live in London. I'm not one of the Londoners that talk about Nigerians, about the situation in Nigeria without feeling it. So I'm a Nigerian and I live in Nigeria. So you should not get that impression that people who live abroad comparing Boris Johnson to Buhari. Having said that, and on a lighter mood, perhaps I would like to advise that Mr. Oki should take after Lai Mohammed, if this is all what he can say about what Nigerians are saying about the president's speech. Now, looking at it from another angle, we are not just talking as a politician, I'm talking as a Nigerian. And the way it comes, if the president is still telling us about I will, I shall, or giving us hope after 6 years in governance, I don't believe this is what we need. This administration came into office, came into power on the premises that President Buhari, as a former military man, knows how to secure the life and properties of an average Nigerian. And that was part of the reasons why he was voted. As a matter of fact, I remember that one of the ministers now, former governor of Lagos, Raji Fashola, asked Nigerians to stone them if within 6 months they are not able to perform or put things back in the right manner. But this is almost 6 years now. What have they put right? That is the question we're asking. I'm not talking as a politician, I'm talking as a realist, as a Nigerian who is feeling the bad government that has been in power for 6 years. Look at it. The only thing they are talking about now is we will re-energize, we know we have failed. If you have admitted that, what excuses are you giving now again to say that you are performing? And Nigerians are calling on the president to sack these military security chiefs on the basis that they are tired. They ought to have retired, and they don't have any idea again about securing Nigerians. There is nothing bad in this legitimate call. Both the people we elected at the Senate rep, opinion leaders, have advised the president. But it appears we have a president that doesn't listen and does things in his own way. And if we continue to fail and we continue to do the same thing, how do we now expect a positive result?
So
it's a legitimate call.
Okay, you know, just looking at how things played out, while the PDP was there, Nigerians didn't think they were satisfied with what was going on. Then they voted the APC. Yeah. And now there are more questions about the APC in terms of what they fared, how they fared. So isn't it time you think Nigerians should look to another political party to give them a shot?
Nigerians have tried two husbands now, you know, like a female. And they know which one is better. In fact, what Nigerians are now saying is that if you cannot take us any further, as you promised during your campaign, leave us where we are, leave us with the PDP. And practically, as a politician, I don't see the emergence of any third force politically. There has been instances whereby we assume that if you vote in a youth as a president, perhaps things can get better. But here we are. Dele Momodu was contested to be the president of this country. Likewise, Omowole Sowore. And we all know that these are people who are fighting the cause of humanity. But did Nigeria ever vote for them? No. Let Gani Fawehinmi, establish a political party. Did Nigeria look towards his side? No. So I don't believe there can ever be any third force in Nigeria. What I believe is we should strengthen our political party and make sure that the voters do the right thing.
Just one moment, Mr. Adeyemi. Yes. Are you saying that we are stuck with APC and PDP or PDP at any given time? We don't have any other option?
We are not going to import foreigners to come and be our politician in Nigeria.
Okay.
It is Nigerians that will be. It is Nigerians that are the politicians. And what is bad about the politics we play in Nigeria is that you can see people moving from PDP. The PDP you have accused of not doing the right thing in Nigeria, moving to APC tomorrow, and when they move to APC, because APC is the
Mr. Let me take this to Mr. Oki as well. So many issues that he has already raised. Do you want to very, very quickly respond before we take a break?
I'd rather not go back to joining EU. Else, we will be talking about what did PDP do and what did PDP do not do. I'd rather look at the content of the president's speech of January 1st, 2021. Let's look at the content of that address and then dissect it. You see, talking to chieftains of PDP about you've spent 100 years or 200 years, you look at what my brother is saying, and I'm sure he cannot be serious, that Omowole Sowore is this, Dele Momodu is that. You ask the simple question. If, in his opinion, that APC has failed, and he agrees that they failed most woefully in 6 years. Your question to him was direct. Do we look for another, a new face? And he cannot come out. So I'd rather not join issues. Let's look at the content of the president's address. Let us dissect it.
We'll do a lot more of that when we return. We need to go to break, but we'll be back in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, Mr. Oki, well, part of expectations, including having heard the speech from what we just heard of Senator Ali Ndume, there are questions about actions. He wants, the president wants, rejig the cabinet, some sort of action. And then he also, like he has always spoken about, the questioning the security strategy, operations, not satisfied with how some of those things are going, and that is a member of your party. Should the president accede and perhaps look inwards, rejig and perhaps inject new ideas to back up this speech?
Thank you very much, Chamberlain. Unfortunately, that is what the likes of my brother don't want to hear. But that's the gospel truth. Give it to Senator Aline Dume. He's been very consistent. He is on the field as chairman, committee that is oversighting the army. He wears the shoes from the Northeast, so he understands and knows very clearly where it pinches. Someone like Aline Dume must be listened to. Again, the president clearly enunciated in its speech that he's had not just the NSAS protesters, but also people like Senator Aline Dume, that he's had them very clearly. And I think that's important. Very, very important. What I think we should expect in coming days, not weeks, in coming days, is for the president to come back and begin to walk that talk. Not before now. Senator Ndume has been very, very consistent with what we are giving the military. If you look at that clip, it's talking about just one thing: tools. It requires funding. And my brother said there was a time 365 billion was given to the president, and later he said they've decimated. That's not the issue. If you look at 365 billion, very humongous amount of money by our standard. When you look at the issue of security, modern day security, tooling, you will know that it's just a droplet. And one thing we should all know is this: like former vice president in the military era, Rear Admiral Ihom once said that better soup na money cook am. We must be ready. We must be willing, especially when you have porous land borders as we have in Nigeria, over 1,000 land borders. As big as the almighty America is, United States of America, they have this challenge. If not, why would President Trump want to build wall around America? It is just for one reason: because their borders are porous. Trump could also have this challenge here.
But you know, and you just mentioned what the US is doing about their own challenge. But what are we doing about ours? Because comments credited to the president were saying, well, it's only God that can police such borders. So compare those actions and words to what you just highlighted.
Chamberlain, I will definitely address it. One thing is very clear. President Trump did not wake up one day or during his campaigning, sessions that, hey, we are going to build wall around America. He had security information from people that have been there. Not like your everyday Nigerian, which is a specialist in military tactics, which is a specialist in intel gathering, intel analysis. The president has come out very clearly now to say, I've heard, I listened, I am giving you assurances that in coming weeks and months, we are going to revamp the whole system. We are talking about insecurity. Most times we want to concentrate on just the military, forgetting that there must be a symbiotic relationship between the military and the police.
All right.
Today we're talking about NSAS issue.
We've talked so much about security from the perspective that we're looking at it now. But another concern that has played out in that regard is one of the major causative agents of insecurity is the imbalance in the economy. So let me take this to Mr. Odeyemi. We have heard over and over again, that there is a need for us to take a better look at our economy, opportunities to circulate so that there is equity and equality all over the place. What would you like to see from what the president has said? Well, core part of it, he said, our focus is on revamping the economy through the National Economic Diversification Agenda that supports the primary goal of national food self-sufficiency, and he goes on and on. So what would you like to see to ensure that indeed it's not just talk, but it's actually talk that will be matched with action? What will indicate to you that the president meant what he said?
Before I go into that, I want to talk a little bit about what Senator Ali Ndume said, and which was more or less agreed to by my brother Oki. I want to say that if such statement had come from anybody in PDP or from an average Nigerian, it will be tagged it will be, taken in another way. What has Senator Ndume said that Reverend Father Kuka has not said? It's merely the same thing, but simply because the messengers are different. One belongs to the APC, the other one is just a Reverend Father and a Nigerian. It means different things to the president and the likes of Mr. Oki. Having said that, coming to the issue of economy, I want to believe that nobody is an encyclopedia of knowledge, and the president has not proclaimed himself to be an expert in this field. But the point is, even in his own field, where he has proclaimed himself to be an expert, which is the security, we are not getting anything. So what I would have expected normally is for him to have put a round peg in a round hole, just like President Olusegun Obasanjo, President Jonathan did when they were there. Nobody has the monopoly of value. Nobody has vast knowledge about every subject. We are all good in our different fields. So what I would have expected the president to do is to appoint experts in economic area to look into our situation in Nigeria, to look into economic books and make sure that they propose a solution towards a situation whereby our economy will improve. Part of the reason why this government came into power is the issue of security. They talk about economy, they talk about the corruption. And if you are to award them marks now, they have failed in every sector. So my advice on economy will be, let him put the round peg in the round hole. And this is why I will suggest, or just like everybody has been saying, that there should be a rejig of the ministers. We have seen situations whereby people who have ideas about security are being put in to handle labor. People who are experts in the health sector are being asked to come and manage transportation. All these things, anomalies and lopsidedness, are not too good for the administration, and that is why it's recording failures. So my advice on economy will be, put round pegs in the round hole. Seek help where you need it, and you don't have to be proud about it that you know everything.
Well, I'm wondering, Mr. Odeyemi, if you can cite an example or two where you think, the wrong people have been in the wrong places, it might be a good idea. However, one also wonders, what specific things would you like to see beside just the people? Because we have been talking about people in specific places at the same time. However, there is a need to be clear about what, not just who now, but what do we expect to see that will help the economy of the country in all of its regions, the 6 regions that it has, 6 geopolitical regions that it has, and all of the states that it has. What would you like to see that will make a difference?
One of the major things that is affecting our economy is the security situation in this country. Nobody will like to invest his money in a security-ravaged country. There is no way you can encourage people from America, from China, from all over the world to come and invest in Nigeria and boost your economy if the security situation is so bad. And I think that is one of the key issues that the president needs to tackle. And it is an area where we have recorded failure.
Okay, so Mr. Oki, you say these are some of the things we need to see. We need to get some action, some traction in a matter of days and weeks. What happens if in months we don't see anything?
Well, I think we must always look at things very clearly from a position that where are we heading? Where are we today? Where are we coming from? The president has come out 5 days ago to say 2021 fiscal year, this is the way to go. What are the ways which he has initiated? You look at the 2021 budget, which he signed, and that budget is speaking to 3 issues: security, health, education. These are pillars that will help to deepen, economic stimulation, particularly at the MSM level, which is what we need. Importantly, we must also understand very clearly too that no country has become great without feeding itself, without consuming what is produced. This is the only country where, when my brother is coming back, as he said, in a week or 2, he will buy virtually everything his family needs that can be gotten here locally. He will not eat cornflakes that is produced from Jos. He will take cornflakes that is produced by Kellogg and bring to Nigeria. And the real issue is this, which we must begin to look at. And hopefully that in the next couple of days, if not week, the president will come out again to tell us what is doing with the economic diversification program for this year, which will help to stimulate the economy. It's given us assurance about security, which is the important thing. You can only thrive in a safe and secured environment. And I believe,
all right, Mr. Oki,
and
that
I know
happens
so
to be
many Nigerians, in our millions, also believe that.
That happens to be our next focus.
How do we, just a minute, Chamberlain,
if you can wind down,
how do we
please
stimulate economy? The way to go about it is massive, massive, massive employment. The 774 thing should not just be a one thing off. Let us have massive employment wherein people will have the power, to consume. When that is done, we'll begin to look upward again.
All right. So we'll talk about the budget and the economy. That's coming up next. But we'll have to thank you, Mr. Fuad Oki, an APC chieftain, as well as Diron Odemi, Deputy National Secretary, Public Secretary of the PDP. Gentlemen, thank you both for talking to us today. The economy is coming up next, and we will be back in a moment. Welcome back. Well, yes, indeed, focusing on the economy. What do we expect? How are they going to play themselves out? 2 gentlemen joining us next on the program. Mr. Bernard Kabweze is a DG, Budget Office, as well as Dr. Chimuke Oba, a development economist. Gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Mr. Kabweze, let me start with you. In terms of expectations of Nigerians, it is huge. So if you could, we know that the president did speak about what they intend to do to revamp the economy and ensure that the national economic diversification agenda is on track. So could you tell us, how is this budget connecting to that, raising expectations for Nigerians?
Well, thank you, Chamberlain, and Happy New Year once again.
Thank you.
Basically, the budget, as you know, is simply a tool. The budget is not an end in itself, it's a means to an end. And underlying every budget, is certain objectives and goals and principles that the government of the day is pursuing. A budget is, as much an economic tool as a political one that seeks to basically deliver on the proverbial dividends of, democracy. So when you look at this budget of 13.6 trillion naira approximately, an aggregate of 4.1 trillion naira, which equates to 30.1% has been allocated to capital expenditure. This is consistent with the policy, adopted by the current administration to try and allocate up to 30% of the budget to capital expenditure, and especially focused on the infrastructure sector. We face critical infrastructure, challenges, and it's really, it's imperative that we fix that for the economy to grow. Ultimately, the budget must deliver growth, because without growth, everything else that we're talking about really, doesn't, will not fall into place. But let me say this up front, that the federal government's budget, it's only one source of public spending in Nigeria. As you know, we operate a federal system. So we've got the federal government's budget, we've got the budgets of the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. And by the way, each of the 774 local governments is required.
We'll let you shed more light on that important part as well. Just hang on a minute. We'll let you shed light on that important part as well. But let's also quickly get Dr. Oba's brief opening before we go to break. Dr. Oba, do you see this achieving the required growth for the economy, the budget?
First, it's important to make a quick distinction between growth and development, as it were. Whereas the budget may crystallize into a minimal growth or relative growth in terms of GDP and all that. But what's the essence of growth when it doesn't reflect in the standard of living of people who are resident in Nigeria? So for me, I'm more interested in how would this budget, better the loss of millions of Nigerians that are already trapped in poverty, extreme poverty level. And in answering that question, I will say in clear terms that I do not see the budget as currently proposed addressing those critical issues, more so when we have witnessed over time that, yes, whereas the capital budget is about 30.0%, 30.1% of the entire budget, the big question should be how much of such money is actually expended on key infrastructural or social sectors that will now give rise into key improvement in development in the country.
All right, Dr. Oba. So, gentlemen, just hold your positions. We'll be back in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Mr. Akabreze, it appeared as though you were trying to highlight how the combined effect of the federal and state budgets can have an impact on the economy and perhaps provide the requisite growth. Is that the point you're trying to make? Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chamberlain. I was, trying to, avert our minds to the fact that the budget, the national budget, does not equate to the federal government's budget. But it seems like Nigerians generally have basically all the analysis is focused on the federal government's budget. When people talk about how much we are spending on education, they're talking about how much the federal government is spending, is allocating. Whereas education is a matter on the concurrent legislative list, so is health. Those really key issues called issues of development that speak to the people are really, based on our constitutional arrangement, more in the terrain of, the subnational governments. But people really, some people really don't look in that direction, and they expect the federal government's budget to solve every problem. So every community in the country is looking to see some provision for it in the federal government's budget, and it really can't be, that way. Having said that, also the reality is that when you combine the budgets of the federal, the state, and the local governments in aggregate public spending in Nigeria is way below the threshold where it should be. Aggregate public spending, as a percentage of our GDP, is about 50% of the African average. And why is that so? It's so because our revenue generation, public, sector revenues, government revenues in Nigeria is 1/3 of the, it's also a half of the African, average. Our tax to GDP ratio is among the lowest is about the lowest in the whole world. I'm not even talking about Africa. So our budget, not just of the federal, but of the subnational governments, our budgets are way too small to be able to address our needs in the way that people expect. Unfortunately, in the last 5 years, we've found ourselves first in the recession 2016, and then just as we were turning the curve, the COVID-19 induced recession. And during a recession, it's difficult to grow revenues, because during a recession, you've got to act in a counter-cyclical manner. And so government's drive for revenues have been constrained. When we came up with Economic Recovery and Growth Plan in 2017, the 2017 to 2020 plan, the plan was to move government revenue as a percentage of GDP from our base of 6% back in 2014 to 15% by 2020, which will be 1% below the African average. But here we are in 2020 at just above 8%.
Yes. If you don't mind me butting in for just one moment, something that you said earlier, and which, of course, you have repeated a good number of times in previous conversations, that we have a very, very low budget culture, because what we have, as you have often said, is a fraction of what we should be spending, to get us to where we want to get to. But the challenge here is what I would like you to point to, because if we look at the budget that we have now, we are spending a good amount of money, a significant, something in the region of 1/3 or thereabout, on debt servicing. What we are spending on capital infrastructure, I would like you to also speak to that, because perhaps if we had a better infrastructure instead of a capital, so much easier for people to go into business, because it is only when people do good business and they're able to make good money that they can pay more tax and more revenue into the coffers of government. So do you want to speak to what the challenges are as to why we are unable to generate the kind of revenue that we need to generate as a nation, especially in the light of the debt servicing burden and the very low capital budget that we always have?
Well, I think that this goes back in time to history. Pre-independence and in the First Republic, taxation represented the principal source of government revenues, and that's how budgets were funded. And that's how, countries all over the world fund their budgets. Unfortunately, when we became an oil-rich economy, in the early 70s, we basically dropped the ball on taxation and focused on resource-based rent as a means for funding government. Basically, what we call the social contract that forms the basis of modern governance was vitiated, and the social contract says that the sovereign has authority to tax the people, but in exchange, it also delivers goods, public goods and services. But we basically, taxpayers' money just became a cliche. Most Nigerians were not paying taxes, and over time, the culture of not paying taxes has taken root, and it's extremely difficult to recreate that culture. And so now it's become a chicken and egg situation, because unfortunately, not only did we drop the ball on focusing on taxation, as we focus on the resource-based rent, the quality of public spending through the decades was admittedly poor. And so now you've got a situation where, to get people to pay taxes, they're saying, no, give me good, deliver goods and services first before I can pay taxes. And it becomes a chicken and egg situation. But the point is, if we're going to make progress, we've got to reestablish that, social contract that forms the basis for modern governance.
Okay.
The people must pay taxes and the people must hold government to account. We demonstrated that in Lagos State, that is doable. You increase the taxes and hold yourself accountable, more accountable to the people for what you do with the taxes. And this needs to happen on a national basis.
There are a number of other issues to raise on that, but let me take Mr. Chukwuze's comment on that one. How do you see the response of Mr. Akabueze?
Yeah, first, I agree with him that the subnational budget needs to be part of the overall national budget. Unfortunately, we Nigerians pay little or no attention to what is happening at the subnational level. So it's also the same pilferage, wastages, and all that happens there. And that is why we're having also the kind of governance outcomes that we've got. But beyond that, with respect to the infrastructure issues and tasks, let me go to task issue. Dr. Akabueze just spoke about social contract chicken and eggs issue. Yes, Nigerians are supposed to pay tax, but the key question is that even now that we aren't paying tax, that we are depending more on oil revenue, oil rents, what is the government or the governments at all the levels are doing with the resources that are available to them? If you look at our national budget and subnational budgets annually, it does appear that the security votes and expenses made on the governor's office and all those things, buying of cars, in fact, on frivolities, are so much that the citizens have lost confidence in the ability of the government to utilize the funds available to them to improve their lot. So if you've lost that confidence in your government, it becomes increasingly difficult for people to also pay tax. Secondly, if you do a proper analysis of responsiveness to tax payments in this country, you find out that it's even the poor people, the civil servants that are paying tax. Yes, the informal sector is huge, so there's a lot of tax avoidance and evasion. But you find out that the critical mass of the elites, those in government and those who are doing big businesses are not paying tax. They evade tax, they avoid tax, and which is why some of us are preaching that let's have, yes, you can reduce personal income tax a bit to encourage people to pass, but VAT, we should have a graduated of VAT rates, so that some of them that consume very luxury goods can pay VAT, because that's the only way you can get them to pay this money. When you do a phased VAT rates, where you have little tax for those critical basic goods for poor people, they pay very little. But for those that consume champagne and all those big things, you can raise your VAT up to 25-30%, and because they're interested in spending money on those things, they will pay tax. We also need to increase our tax nets instead of increasing tax rates as it were. But most importantly, to get people to respond very well on tax payments, the government must show commitment also that they are with the people. You know, recently I said it's about sacrifices. If you check the cost of governance, you see people buying Jeeps, SUVs every year. You see how much that is being spent at state houses, both at the federal and district. When a governor wants to move, he goes with a convoy of about 20 cars that he used fuel, and most of these cars are started and they steam for at least 10 to 15 minutes before the governor enters. These are wastages. And we, the citizens, are seeing some of these things. And when you ask them to pay tax, you don't expect them to pay those tax. Now, in terms of expenditure, I was speaking earlier on in terms of capital expenditure. You know, when we say budget performance, we say, like the president said, he said budget performance was about 97%. And I laughed. I am one of those in the school of thought that spending is different from budget performance. That you spent 100 naira does not mean that you have actually performed 100%. You may have spent 100,000 on wastages, when in actual sense the benefits that would have accrued from such expenditure is about 1%. So we measure performance based on benefits, based on outcome, based on impact, and not based on actual spending. So most times we do a budget and we spend these funds without a commensurate benefit to those who are supposed to utilize such things.
Well, Dr. Oba, thank you. Let me ask Dr. Akwabize some of the issues that you have raised. Dr. Akwabize, he's talked about one very, very critical thing in terms of the revenue, which is tax net versus tax raise. How do you respond to that one?
Well, you know, first of all, again, based on our constitutional arrangement, taxation of individuals, personal income tax, is in the forte of the state governments. It's based on a national legislation, the personal income tax, but then the administration and the benefits of it derive, basically go to the state governments. It's only taxes of people like members of the armed forces and like that goes to the federal government. And so personal income tax is in the forte of the states. And so individuals who pay taxes is really the state governments. They should be holding to account for their taxes. The corporate taxes go to the federal government. Okay. So that's
an issue. Just a quick one on that. He raised an issue on the fact that we have a very broad SME sector that many of them are not already in the tax net. What's the plan? If you agree with him, what's the plan to bring them into the tax net? Maybe perhaps with some incentives?
Yes. First of all, there is what we call the Joint Tax Board, which basically is a forum for, the Inland Revenue Service, the Federal Inland Revenue Service, and all the internal revenue services of the states and the Federal Capital Territory. This Joint Tax Board is a platform for them to work collaboratively to, try and, grow the tax, expand the tax base. And between 2015 and now, nationally, we've grown that by about 20 million people, adding about 20 million people to the tax, base nationally. It's tough work trying to get, especially people in the informal sector, especially in a country where you do not have a unique identifier. These are all the things that having this national ID number will also help. There's now a unified, tax identification number system, which, over the last, few years, the Joint Tax Board has, implemented. And so now, that is being driven. That's why for you to have a bank account now, you need a TIN. For you to do business with any of the governments, they require you to provide a TIN. These are all part of the framework for establishing a tax payment culture, which we haven't had in place, over the past decades, and which therefore make it difficult to basically, focus on taxation.
Yeah, one other thing that he raised. My apologies. Yes. One other thing that he raised is to draw a difference between budget spending and budget performance. Perhaps that is also why people are reluctant to pay taxes, because they haven't seen the effect of whatever public spending on their lives. So you want to, respond to that part of the budget spending performing better than budget performance on the lives of the people?
Well, first of all, when it comes to budget performance, usually, there's a framework called the input, output, outcome, framework. The input is what you put in, which is the resources that you put in. The output is a tangible physical measure of what that gets you. And then the outcome is the impact that, that it actually delivers. And, it's easy for us to measure input, output. But again, what happens all over the world is that civil society organizations and interested people like Dr. Oba hold the feet of government to the fire when it comes to outcome. So it's not sufficient to throw it out as a general statement, but it's to say, basically, with examples and say, look, in this particular area, you've spent this much, but we don't think that, value has been delivered, because government has its own internal mechanisms for measuring, value that is being delivered. There's a budget monitoring and evaluation, department, even in the budget office of the Federation. There's also a national monitoring and evaluation, department. There's a requirement of the law, the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, for us to issue a quarterly budget implementation report, which goes to the National Assembly, goes to the Fiscal Responsibility Commission, and other, which basically is saying this, and the Auditor General office also looks into this thing. So from the standpoint of government, where they think there hasn't been value, that's what gets called out, even in the Auditor General's report and other such reports that you see in the public domain. So, but if there's a sense the public that that's not, the public needs to do its own independent assessment and call government out. That's how it happens, in other climes.
So, Dr. Oba, have you or would you be perhaps interfacing with some of those agencies or taking those measures to enhance perspectives on this subject matter which you just raised about budget performance?
Yeah, I think that's one of the decisions I took this January. But in specific times, Dr. Akabueze just asked if I can mention few. During COVID-19, the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, distributed money, shared money. Let me use that word, shared money. And before that happened, the argument was that how would you determine the poorest of the poor? They brought up the issue of how much money you have in your bank account, the credit you recharge and all that. But one thing struck me when they said that the list that will be adopted is the list they've been using in the last 5 years for conditional cash transfer. Now, the big question I asked to myself and I threw in the air was, number one, if you've been giving people money in the last 5 years and their standard of living has not improved, the big question will be, what initially was the objective for such venture? Because the truth is that if such money is given to reduce poverty, then we should be able to see poverty reducing in Nigeria and not increasing. And when you check the budget that has been made for the same ministry in 2021 budget, social reinvestment and all that, you see that it is very huge. So the key question is that what do we intend to achieve with this thing? You can't give people money when you've not trained them on how to manage funds, on entrepreneurship and all those things. So what it means that is dash money. that goes into feeding, just feeding without creating wealth. And for me, that is not sustainable. That is one aspect. The other aspect is insecurity. Most times when budgets are meant for security, security architecture here now, I'm looking at the defense budget, the police budget, the army budget, and all that. It's usually very huge. But the question is also that we have seen insecurity, increasing in the country over these years. I'm not just saying this administration, but over the years. Now, if I'm the person of authority, the big question I'll ask is that what is the proximate cost, or actual cost of rising insecurity in Nigeria, in the country? So it becomes important to identify the key costs. It's like treating headache when the cause of headache is cancer. Until you treat cancer, the headache will continue reoccurring. So it's important that we understand that unemployment, poverty issues, and health issues, health security issues are part of the underpinning driving force for the rising insecurity in Nigeria. So it becomes important to begin to deal with those key issues underpinning insecurity, other than increasing security budget. So when you see that we're increasing security budget, we can say we have budgeted 1 trillion naira and we spend 1 trillion and we say performance 100%. But when you check the actual performance in terms of the objectives for expenditure, you find out that we are less than 20%. So these are some of the key examples I'll give. But like I said, part of the decisions I took in 2021 is to get more involved in monitoring and evaluation of public expenditure across national and subnational.
Gentlemen, we're winding down now. If you could keep your responses short, we'll appreciate it. But Mr. Kabose, in addition to whichever response you like to give to what he just said, could you also speak to, what is the thinking, and this has to do with the revenue challenges we have, because at the moment, sale of national assets, we don't know how long we can continue. But is there any thinking, or what is the thinking concerning states, rather than going cap in hand to the center, do a lot more with the resources they have within their states, such that they can generate a lot more within those states?
Well, if I start with that, truth is, constitutionally, the federal government, is limited in terms of its policy options. And so we try and use persuasion, we try and use carrot and stick approach. So for instance, there's a World Bank funded program called the SIFTAS program. Recently, you heard about the World Bank approving $1.5 billion. It was essentially towards that, going, to the states. It's not the federal government. But because the World Bank only lent to the national government, which then on-lends to the states. And it's under a program. This, it's a state fiscal transparency and accountability, where in exchange for basically improving their systems of fiscal accountability, which includes getting their budget out in time, publishing reports, fiscal reports, doing all of that, putting in place audits and all of that. The states that demonstrate progress in that get access to these resources from the World Bank. It's through those kinds of incentives that the federal government, but otherwise, it rests with the state legislatures. It rests with the citizens of those states to drive accountability at the level of the states. But let me speak to
if you could make it short so we can wind down, please.
About impact on poverty or whatever. But oftentimes a lot is made about the money allocated to the social investment program. And when you look at it, it looks so large. But when you unpack it, so let me take two key components of that. If you take the N-Power program, recently there were 500,000 young Nigerians, employed under that. They get 30,000 naira allowance every month. That amounts to 15 billion naira every month. To pay, each of them is 30,000, but that's 500,000 people. That's 15 billion. On the cash conditional cash transfer register. And yes, that is dash money. And globally, that has been established to help lift some people. There are some people who get a dash money of 5,000 naira a month. The national, register for that is now over 3-point-something million people. That's what the president said.
Okay, because I think some of the concerns was the yardstick for some of those, which they also questioned.
If you take only 2 million of people who get 5,000 naira a month, if you give 5,000 naira a month to 2 million people, that's 10 billion naira. So these monies add up very easily, whereas at that level, 5,000 naira isn't going to lift somebody out of poverty. But the poverty problem will have been worse without it.
Okay, I want to anchor at that point. Pardon me, Dr. Chinwike Uba, development economist, and Mr. Ben Akabo is a DG Budget Office. Gentlemen, thank you both for talking to us today on the program.
Thank you.
Well, the issues are not just going to go away. We just have to continue to pound on
It's
them.
economy.
Yes, Comrade Edwin's tweet is the first of your contribution today on the program. It talks about the service chiefs. The first lockdown and ASU strike were indirectly related to NSARS. Nigeria can't afford a second lockdown. It's demoralizing and demotivating for young officers to be retiring while their chiefs are still working. Allow the service chiefs to retire for sanity to return.
Well, Mr. Pali, talking about APC and governance, says, I believe APC came in to correct the wrongs, not to keep blaming after 6 years and take us back. All we hear from FG is, we have seen and we will do. When do we get to hear that we have done and this is the result?
Great question. Folari says, thanks for using your platform to enlighten more Nigerians who had hoaxed up the COVID-19 here in Akwa Ibom, particularly as I have been observing since I came. Careless approach abounds here, especially wearing of masks.
Well, Irabo Josephs, your email says, the ABC members are not telling the president the truth of state of affairs in Nigeria. How can one explain that the service chiefs have been on set for 6 years? APC has an agenda which they are hiding from Nigerians, he says. Well, there you go. Thank you all for your comments. Hey, always nice to hear from you. We'll see you again tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
And I'm Ayo Makide. Have a wonderful day and please be safe.